One day, 2 football games, and a lot of best ball teams out there in limbo land waiting for the best ball regular season to be finalized. We're going to dive in to the doubleheader Monday Night Football game, all the sweats that you guys have going, that we have going, and what does it all mean for the upcoming best ball playoffs here on Monday Night Best Ball at Spike Week. Let's do it.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, Devin. I'm glad you're enjoying listening. If you have any extra deliveries, come bring them by the house because it is absolutely freezing here. I have no interest in leaving the house, and I also don't really feel like making dinner either. So, Devin, bring them on by. Olaf, hello. Updog, yes. I'm very excited. I've been frantically looking at every possible team that I've drafted that is in the playoffs, that could get into the playoffs tonight with some big games. I'm very excited. I am legitimately very excited. I'm not just bullshitting that. It's not where like we say something's interesting, right? Where everybody always says, oh, that's interesting, and it's never actually really interesting. You just don't have another word. I am legitimately excited. I'm also excited for these 2 games. They're kind of like shitty-ish games, but there's a more fantasy appeal than I thought that there would be with 2 shitty games. Of course, we have the Dolphins. We'll get into all that. Shout out Cobra Kai. Moment of silence for this is definitely true. Just yet another week 14. It's a week that ends in a number that had some catastrophic injuries to the best ball portfolio. We will talk about CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and all of that. Shout out Zen Q7, Olaf, and Wet Like I'm Book 122. Devin Booker, he is wet. I will not to be inappropriate, but agree. Went from 6 to midnight with that Brian Robinson update today. I was definitely genuinely concerned about that. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Jay Jenks, you guys are bringing the heat. Texans are down so bad. That is definitely true. And hello, Melch. Rob, let's just get into it right away. These 2 games tonight. How are we feeling? You got any big sweats? Got any big things you're looking for? Just anything and any general thoughts? Last day of the best ball season.
Well, my very, very, very first thought is, the hell's the NFL doing? How are we starting both of these games at the same time?
Yeah,
How are we not staggering these? So I love it because I love that there's 2 games, because we might have hit on this before, but my absolute favorite DFS for football back in the day was the primetime Sunday night tournaments, the 2-game slate. Yep. So I get to do a 2-game slate tonight, play some Tajay Spears, get poor. Like that's exactly my plan for the evening.
Who doesn't like playing shitty Giants wide receivers and Dontavian Wicks, and hoping for is Daniel Bellinger playing? Because I've been hoping to play Lawrence Cager. We're really excited for this one.
Yeah, it's so great that these are the teams that they're doing it with. But I actually do. I'm playing a $200 single entry team just to punt it, because I'm like, I just really like these 2-game slates, but stagger the games. Good Lord. Like 7:30, 8:30 at minimum, like is the way I would have done it. But AJ Dillon looks like he's my biggest sweat in terms of best ball. Like I was just looking through some of my teams. I was telling him, I was kind of gauging through teams that were a little bit behind, and they all seem to have AJ Dillon and Achane, or AJ Dillon, Jaden Reed, but there's just a hell of a lot of AJ Dillon. So please score some points tonight, AJ Dillon. After whatever the hell Jalen Hurts did last night, he hurt me the most this week.
I think it was.
I had teams not advancing because of him last night.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I can believe he didn't go for 35, but you just feel like with Hurts, frankly, with both of the quarterbacks, Dak has almost reached that level where you're just shocked when they don't score 25. And Jalen Hurts in particular, I think it was, sorry, Bullock, if you're listening, shout out Bullock, from the Discord, was up something like 12 in a season-long matchup, needed to win, obviously. And he had Jalen Hurts, like I said, up 12 against Aubrey, whatever, the Cowboys kicker, and lost, which is, there's lots of bad beats, right, that happen in season long and best ball and everything. that's up there.
That's a bad one.
That's a pretty rough beat. But I'm sure, like you, lots of people. That was brutal. You know, the Eagles have been so good, so consistent, and it's so 3 guys, 4 guys every week, just locked and loaded good games. You know, how good, I don't know, but always good. And that was a bad time, a really bad time to pull that last night.
Yeah, it did not help. I was just looking for floor games, right? Like legitimate floor games, not whatever the hell that was. We were just looking for the 16 points, the 12 points from AJ Brown, maybe. Give me a couple there. And I legitimately think I have 3 teams that are not going to advance now just because of how bad Hurts in particular was last night.
Yeah, it's crazy. Shout out to me. I have a FFPC main event that somehow is still alive, solely because AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb did not go absolutely nuclear. So we're sitting on Tyreek, and nothing quite like, a $2,000 league. Got to win to make money and make the championship. Starting Tommy DeVito, no big deal. Thanks, Gino, for sitting this one out this week, and Howell being on a bye. That was a lot of fun. But gonna make the sweat tonight a little bit better. B-Shot, no NBA DFS here. We will do NBA best ball. We did some NBA best ball over the course of the summer, but no NBA DFS here. Sean wants to know, normally we're not doing a lot of season-long questions, but I feel like it's in the spirit of what we're talking about tonight. Everybody's hoping for a certain amount of points from someone, and AJ Dillon is one that Rob is hoping for. This is actually a tough question, I think. What I will say is I'm not generally hopeful about AJ Dillon, but the Giants have been a funky sort of run funnel-ish actually on defense. And so I think if there was a spot that AJ Dillon could do it, I think it's that, but I would probably still ride Dobbs without Christian Watson. It's tough. AJ Dillon is just really bad at football, but it's a little bit of a coin flip. What do you think?
He's not Kiron Williams bad, though. Because I'm still hearing how bad Kyron Williams is.
He ran a 4.840, don't you know?
Just
AJ Dillon might run a 4.840 right about now, if we're being totally honest. But
just my favorite take of the year is that Kyron Williams isn't good. He's just volume based. It's like some of these dudes can get volume and still do nothing. Right.
Also, Kyron was balling against Baltimore yesterday. Like I've been I'm not the guy that Kyron sucks, right? But I have been the guy that's been like, I'm trying to be open-minded and humble about Kyron and stuff, because he's one of my highest owned players or whatever, one of the few W's I get to take over the course of this whole stupid best ball season. And he has been obviously like volume based, but that's part of the point. Good players earn volume generally. You're not gifted volume, you have to earn it. Mm-hmm. And yesterday was like not the first time, because he's looked good plenty of other games, but where he like really looked in a bad matchup. Like I expected not much yesterday from him, even with the volume that he was going to get. I'm like, please just give me double digits, dude. And he did just generally get you double digits, like 14 or 15 PPR points. But the way in which he did it was impressive. Like Baltimore is one of the worst matchups you can have for a running back. The Rams offensive line is really overwhelmed by the Baltimore front. And he was making chicken salad out of chicken shit sometimes there. And they scored a bunch of points. And part of it was because of him, of course, because of Stafford. But that was one of the best games of yesterday. And to see the Rams be able to put up that fight against a good defense, I think was really, like, they're a team we'll talk a lot about tomorrow when we have the show. We'll dive a little bit more into like really specific things we're looking forward to in the fantasy playoffs, but the Rams are one of them to me. That's like, I want to look at, like, my biggest search in Draft IQ, if we logged searches, is I'm looking at my Kyron teams, not just because of how valuable he is, but also because of what the schedule the Rams have upcoming, which it looks really good for the playoffs.
Yeah, there's a few teams that have some really good schedules coming up. Eagles being one of them. It just, they had a tough stretch here. So yeah, good luck to God, where did it go? BKS. I'm guessing he's saying he's 12th and going into tonight. I'm guessing that's for the leaderboard
in regular season BBM. That's awesome. We can pull that up in a little bit and check that out and see if there's any besides you, BKS, that anybody else that can make some movement. We can pull that up in a little bit. But yeah, good luck. I don't know who you have. I assume there's probably some Dolphins on there, because I don't know how you're at the top without any Dolphins. But a decent segue into tonight, where I think the Dolphins are one of the linchpins of the entire season. I would say, I don't know. I'm curious what you think. Dolphins, of course, right? Tyreek specifically, but Mostert and Achane as well, Tua to a lesser degree.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the Cowboys, right? Dak, CD, and the other guys a little bit lesser so, but the Cowboys have just been awesome. And then the Rams guys as cheapies, Kiron and Puka specifically. And then what was the Texans up until last week, right? Stroud, Tank Dell, and Nico were just absolute smashes. They're all three hurt now. I don't suspect any of them are going to play here. We'll get to, week 15, but the Dolphins are going to shake a lot of things up. Is that going to hurt or help you, if we get another big, right, another 25 plus point Tyreek game, another big HN game, etc.?
I mean, I know it's got to help some people, right? Like it's clearly some people are on the fringe and going to have Dolphins that get them through. I just feel like a lot of the Tyreek teams have to already be crushing for the most part if they're in, would be my guess. And I have no data to support that at the moment. So I think that's why when I'm looking through my teams, even though I have 8 or 9% Tyreek, I'm not seeing Tyreek on my fringe teams. Those teams are probably dead or probably already one of the teams that's like 150 points ahead, right? Like, so my fringe Dolphins teams are my Achane teams, although he's crushed. I mean, how many games has he really played this year? So he's helped you get to the point of getting close to advancing. Mostert wasn't even on some of those teams. So I think, and Waddle's the weird one. I want to know like what Waddle teams I have advancing now that we're talking about it. And I already wasn't drafting a lot of Waddle, so my lineups probably wouldn't even be the right ones to look at, I would say. But Waddle is probably the most interesting because, I mean, let's hit on this point. Would you rather at the moment be overweight on Waddle or Tyreek teams advancing?
Oh,
because Tyreek
an all-timer,
such a stud this year. Like
he's the 101. If we redrafted, he's the 101. So right. Do you want the best player or do you want the leverage? Because Waddle is not only leverage on Tyreek Hill, but he's leverage on Mostert and Achane, who are going to be more popular too. On one hand, leverage is very, very powerful. On the other hand, I think I would just rather have like a lot of them, just like a bunch of them on the I would rather. I think I'm like somewhat joking, but also somewhat serious. I think I would just rather have like a Dolphins onslaught, Tyreek, Waddle, Mostert, Achane, right? Tua, just load me up with all of them because I can kind of create my own leverage, right? We talked.
Well, how many of those were you drafting?
Yeah, not a lot, but that's right. Like kind of what I'm saying. Like if I had my druthers, I would just give me all of them. I think I'll just take Tyreek. I know
it's
maybe that's
Tyreek.
a lame, and that's maybe a lame answer, but like, dude, just give me. He's so much better than Waddle that I don't think the leverage quite comes into play.
Yeah, that's probably a valid point. I have 8 Waddle teams that I drafted in total in Best Ball Mania, and I have 2 of those advancing, so it's like a 25% advance rate. And to juxtapose that, we'll look at my Tyreek one real quick. And for Tyreek, I only had 13 Tyreek lineups, which was, pretty standard. And there's 15% of those that are advancing. So my advance rate with Tyreek is down from Waddle, but the sample size is a little bit different. So I will have more Tyreek teams. I don't know if I have any Tyreek Waddle teams. I don't even know if I decided to try to do that anywhere other than on the showdown tonight for the 2-team one. But
yeah.
It was too hard. It was just too hard to do. Yeah, I did not do it once in Best Ball Mania, so I couldn't get through to it.
I know I have it on DraftKings a few different times. It is a little bit different on DraftKings because I feel like you have a little more luxury to do those kinds of things. But I was definitely I was more interested in it, I think, than you were. So I have 8 total out of 187 teams. I'm only advancing one of those teams somehow, but I do know that I did it in the big 555 milli maker, and I'm going to come up like just like a few points short. It's an Andrews team, so it's like Cole Turner is my backup tight end, so it wasn't going to win anyway. But Tua Of course, Dobbins. But the double stack in it has Kiron too. And so it's just like, oh my God, the Dolphins double stack with Kiron could have been so powerful in the playoffs, but we're going to come up just shy, mainly because of the Andrews. Like, it's basically all because of the Andrews injury. I've just been taking zeros at tight end, for a month, and eventually that just eventually that catches up to you. Took a 0, I think, at quarterback, right when Tua was on bye, because that happened to be the week that Ritter was benched. And it's just like the little, right? How can you predict that? If you look at this team, I don't want to pull it up because we don't need to dive that deep into roster baiting a team that's not even going to advance to the playoffs. But if you look at this, you're like, oh my God, he has Kiron and Jerome Ford. Tyjae's been fine. Like, Algiers had good weeks. Tua and Ritter have been good. Tyreek is obviously a smash. DJ Moore's on here. Yeah. It's like all the good picks, but it's not going to advance because sometimes the points just don't come together. That's the craziest part about best ball, is like, people know this from managed leagues where sometimes you can win, you just, points against versus points for, all that stuff. But in best ball, it's not even just that. There is the pod variance of how many points were in your pod. And I do think mine happens to be a little higher scoring, but also just like the way that the points get layered together can just not be optimal for that team, right? Like I said, Tua Ritter is a great combination of quarterbacks to have, and yet they didn't layer in together perfectly. It actually cost me a bunch of points, right? Mark Andrews gets hurt and that buries me. And then like Kiron was out for a stretch, right? And so I'm losing, the way things, it's all these smashes, but it just didn't come together perfectly. So that was a little disappointing, but can't complain about the Dolphins. I mean, if we're going to complain, there's a lot of things to probably complain about, but Dolphins teams are certainly not one of them.
Losing quarterbacks. So I think this point in the chat is a really good one, where B. Sandark is saying so many dead teams will advance this year. And it's so true. We were talking about this a little bit last week with the quarterback thing. I think the tight end one is going to be huge as well. I still see a lot of teams that are advancing with dead tight ends, just completely dead, whether it be Mark Andrews and, like, who knows, Greg Dulcich or some of these other guys that are just not going to be on the field by any means. But now you add definitely one more quarterback next week, right? Herbert seems like he's going to have surgery. They're going to shut him down for the rest of the year.
I would assume. Yeah.
Right. So I think we were at 11 starting quarterbacks down last week. So that makes 12. CJ Stroud is in concussion protocol, which, if I'm the Texans, I mean, I know they're theoretically fighting for a playoff spot, but now you have Nico out, you have Tank Dell out. This is your franchise quarterback for years to come. You have no shot you get to the playoffs, and what do you do as Houston if you get to the playoffs? Does it matter? No. Honestly, morale. I mean, I guess if you want that argument, but it's just, it's showing that, like, Herbert was carrying some teams. I have a team that's not advancing because Herbert got hurt, where he was my last standing quarterback on the team, and he scored 0.1 points yesterday because he took that injury. So if I have a team that almost got in with Herbert, there are teams that were already locked in with Herbert that had some of these other guys with them, whether it be Aaron Rodgers and, name the other, Deshaun Watson or something. It's a totally viable, like, roster of quarterbacks to have to get a team through. So we're going to start seeing, you're going to be looking in your week 1 pods and just like going, okay, that team's dead. That team's dead. That team's dead. I only have to beat X amount of teams now to get through to the toughest week, which is, I mean, obviously week 17 is the toughest week, but like in terms of advancing, week 16, 1 out of 16 is just a nightmare. And you're going to be looking like, all right, well, at least some of these teams are going to get through, or you're going to be looking at some of your own teams and be like, well, I'm totally dusted on this team. You're just going to be able to go into the info and write dead team, no quarterback.
Yeah. Dead team, no quarterback, dead team, no tight end, best running back is Jaylen Warren. There's so many of those. Like you said, it is so funny. I said I was going through a lot of my teams today because we've reached this point, and when you spend this much time drafting all these teams, what the fuck is the point to get to here and not like have, the fun of looking through and finding some of the good ones? And there are very few. quite frankly, even drafting hundreds and hundreds of teams, right? So which means I'm advancing, a lot of teams, despite the fact I have a shitty advance rate. When you draft that many teams, there's still plenty that are moving on to the playoffs. And it's like, you start with the team, and the tight ends are at the bottom. I found it to be the tight end is the issue most of the time. You either have one of the two. So like I have a Sam Howell and then, Anthony Richardson is on the team. And you're like, is Sam Howell really gonna get like this week? Okay, he plays the Rams, but then it's like Jets and 49ers. Am I gonna win a best ball tournament with only Sam Howell against those two? Probably not. Okay, now you move on to the next team. You're like, all right, Josh Allen and Ritter on this team. You're like, cool, good at quarterback. You scroll down, you're like, running backs are not bad, and they're alive. Wide receivers, okay, fine. And you get to the tight ends, Mark Andrews and Cole Turner. and you're like, God damn it, so you move on to I move over to the next team, like please, and you get to this next one, and it's like, oh, Kiron, cool. Kyron's on this team, that the quarterbacks are alive, and you're like, I hope Rashad Penny gets activated, because I need some run. It's just like every team has so many flaws, even when these are good and advancing teams. I've mentioned a few different times that it's not my highest scoring team anymore, but has been my highest scoring team in BBM most of the year. Josh Jacobs. Now it looks like he's going to be fine. Well, we'll see. It's too early, I guess, technically to say that, but they seem somewhat optimistic about him. But it's like he sneakily goes down, right? And like think about all of those teams that are going to have these advancing players that even if they're not the Tyreeks, right, or the Achans or the Kyrons or the Mosterts or whatever, or the Tank Dell, but even if they weren't the big league winners, just surviving and scoring points all year has helped a lot of teams, right? Why is Josh Jacobs on that team? Because like he's just been scoring double-digit points every single week, even though he's been a horrible pick for a 2-3 turn guy. And like that guy's dead now, and you've been relying upon that guy, right? And so I do think every year, again, same thing with injuries. We'll say this, like there's going to be a lot of dead teams, but this year there's definitely going to be a lot of dead teams. Like when Tank goes down, right? Teams were relying upon Tank Dell. Teams were relying upon Nico Collins. If you had Justin Herbert, you were probably fucking relying. I know he hasn't been awesome, but you draft him in the 5th round. If you're advancing with him, you're probably bad at quarterback, right? Mark Andrews. I have a bunch of advancing Mark Andrews teams. It's like there's just so many landmines that if you just have teams that have some health, I do still feel, optimistic at this point.
Speaking of the Raiders, since you brought up Josh Jacobs, I just want to point out that my mentions have been super quiet about Devonte Adams the last 10 weeks.
Yeah, funny how that works.
No one's been hitting me up to tell me about how wrong I was about Devonte Adams. Guys, it's still at King Coakley on X now. Like, if you want to start showing me game logs of Devonte Adams, we can look through them together. We'll look at the 8.6 and the 10.1 and, and just we'll watch the video of him with his head held down as he walks off the field after scoring 0 points against the Minnesota Vikings in a dome. They couldn't even put up points. I'm down for it. We can have these chats if you guys would like to have them. So just pointing it out. Just pointing it out.
Hamlet's trolling you, but it is funny that when we're wrong, I'm not saying you're doing this, Hamlet. I know you're trolling Rob, but like when we're wrong, it's always, well, if he does it in the playoffs, he can still go off in the playoffs. It's like, yeah, but you can't have it both ways. You can't victory lap the guys that you get right during the regular season and then still say, oh yeah, I know I was wrong about him in the regular season, but there's 3 weeks left. What if he does it in the playoffs? It's like by that logic, you're literally never going to be wrong. You know what I mean? We can do it. Like, how am I ever going to argue with you? The guy was good in the regular season. Okay, you're right. But if I say, well, what about the playoffs? Right? Last year, Josh Jacobs, like I basically full faded Josh Jacobs last year, which is funny. He's on the fantasy gods are sick, disgusting people. That he's now on my best team and he gets hurt. But we were saying last year that like, look, he's been awesome, but he had such a bad playoff schedule that like he's going to be really, really popular. If you don't have him, it's actually not that big of a deal, which sounds crazy from the RB1 overall, or RB2 overall, whatever he was. And he was okay in the fantasy playoffs, but it's not like you needed him to win. And so, but that pushback was just like, you're just saying that because you faded him. right? You're just saying that because you faded him. But then if we say, well, we did fade this guy and it was correct, it's like the person will be like, well, he's going to be low owned in the playoffs. He's going to be low owned. You know that, right? It's like now he's great to have on your teams. It's like what logic is this? You can roast me for drafting Rashad Penny, as you should. Please do roast away. I've waved that white flag 3 months ago, but like then you can't like not let us roast you about Devonte Adams when you were wrong about Devonte Adams. It's just all that nuance is so funny. The human element of it.
Don't even get me started on the Rashad Penny stuff. I was seeing tweets last night that Rashad Penny is the fix to the Eagles offense, and I almost had no electronics left when I saw that. I'm like, what are we talking about?
Prove this person wrong. You can't. You can't prove them wrong.
Never be able to either.
Nothing else is working. Yeah, might as well try this loser who's been inactive all season.
The guy who can't get on the field above Boston Scott.
Yeah, exactly. Boston Scott. Like they won't even like deactivate, their seventh linebacker for this guy. Like, can we try? I know he's not better than any, DeAndre Swift, but Jesus, can we like try something else? It's not going well. This is like the Chiefs, right? You wonder why things are, why you have to count on getting lucky with penalties not being called at the end of the game when you keep trotting out Justin Watson and MVS and Sky and stuff. Like maybe how about we look in the mirror a little bit, right? And like, let's just play Rashee Rice, and frankly, I know Tony has screwed up multiple times, but he at least was doing a little something when he was out there. But nonetheless, we are clearly to this point where all these fun conversations, and we'll have tons of them over the course of the summer. You mentioned AJ Dillon as kind of one of your, guys that you're
reluctantly having to
exactly. Reluctantly need tonight for sure is exactly how I would probably put it. But is there anybody that you like is maybe a little more popular that you don't have that you're like, you mentioned Waddle, I guess, but anybody else, Mostert, HN, I don't know if you have your requisite ownership of those guys. Like, is there Tua having a big game? Derrick Henry is probably that guy for me. I need Tajay. So maybe I should play Derrick Henry in DFS instead of playing Tajay and losing all my money. But Derrick Henry would be that guy for me that, like, if he has a big game, it'll definitely knock some teams out. Because obviously I wasn't drafting him, and I have a bunch of Tajay.
So, I have the Achane stuff for sure on a bunch of different teams, but I had a huge ownership of Achane. I was like 24% ownership across the board on Achane. So, of course, he's going to be sprinkled on teams that are advancing. He's just going to be all across the board, right? The guy that I'm interested to look up as we start talking about this, and I'm going to pull him up right now, is Jordan Love. So I have 11 lineups with Love in Best Ball Mania. I have an 18% advance rate currently with him. So the ones that are ahead as of the moment look like they are pretty far ahead, and the ones that are behind are significantly behind.
Yeah.
So there's no, oh my God, I have some that are 357 points back. So there's no chance that that's going to happen. But yeah, so I can't even like sweat out Jordan Love, and I'm playing him tonight as part of this 2-team thing. I'm going to roll out a Jordan Love lineup and lose all my money probably, but
this is just doubling back. It's a good comment from Updog. We need to draft the bad players so that we can get leverage off of the good players. I actually, it's funny over the course of the summer, like actually people be like, well, yeah, how could we get low owned guys through? And it's like, well, if you draft the bad players, but like we're not good enough at picking out who the good and bad players are as it is. So like you tell, like I don't know who I thought the guys that I drafted were good. Turns out they're not very good. They're not very good at all. They're quite terrible, actually. So I tried to draft good players and I drafted bad players. So, maybe that makes me the most genius best ball player in all the land because I do have low owned players in the playoffs because I drafted the shittiest ones. But like, I would love, like, if you could tell me in July who's going to have a bad season, but I can somehow get them through to the fantasy playoffs, I'm all in for that. Also love this comment from Off the Schneid. Says, I would legitimately think long and hard about experimental surgery to donate my leg to Tank Dell. So many advancing dead roster spots. Yeah, the Tank Dell one was certainly brutal. One of the most brutal ones, I think, of the season because of how big of a smash he was. And then it to happen right before the fantasy playoffs. And I think this freaking snowball effect of the Texans, of Tank Dell going down, right? Schultz has been hurt. Like, if you onslaughted the Texans, you look like a genius, like an absolute genius for 3 months. And all of a sudden, right before your eyes, like, all of those lineups are like went from amazing to stone dust, because not a single one of those players is going to, the running backs are going to play, I guess, but like
Davis Mills to Noah Brown, baby.
Yeah, like with Noah Brown is the last man standing. Robert Woods, John Mechie still can't get a target, even with all these guys out. It's just, it is what it is. It's, part of the game. I certainly have had my fair share of injuries across all my guys, but man, the Texans one's really brutal.
Here's a fun lineup for tonight. It's 15.82 points behind. It's in 4th place, so it's going to be a battle. But we have Devon Achane, Tyjae Spears, and the juxtapose that, it was Pollard, P. Ryan, Devin Singletary, Kareem Hunt that's already played. But it also has Jaden Reed and Chigakonkwo on the team. So, and Jalen Hyatt. So there is there's some live boys on that team. I mean, it's not all great, but it's to get 16 points between the 3 of them, between the 6 players or whatever.
Who do the Texans play in what's the Robert Woods revenge game?
It's gonna be the Rams, right?
They don't play the Rams.
Oh, the Titans.
Titans. Yep, good call. Because the Derrick Henry versus the Texans. I forgot about that.
Can Derrick Henry take a week off in the playoffs, by the way, just so we can see what Tyjae Spears is?
Well, we'll talk about this tomorrow, because we're going to get into some of the gal brain thoughts that I like to conjure up during this part of the season. Rashad Penny is a one that's a fun bit. I don't actually believe Rashad Penny's ever going to be active during the fantasy playoffs, but it was fun to think about when the Eagles had the bye. Like, it was like, it's the Cardinals in week 17. Like, just win every game before week 17, and at least we got a chance. That's obviously not going to happen. Now, I meant to close that one, but the Derrick Henry point, I do think is like worth discussing. I know I have Tyjae bag, so and not Derrick Henry, so I'm very biased. I will own that bias, but also we assume the Titans are going to lose tonight. I believe they'll be like 4 games out tonight, so not technically eliminated, I don't think, tonight, but pretty darn close to eliminated from the playoffs if they lose tonight. Like, I mean, Derrick Henry has to be one of the clearest shutdown candidates in the league, right? If they're like, we've talked about like Devonte and Josh Jacobs and stuff, those guys would end up being shutdown candidates as well. But Derrick Henry is old, has been banged up, just got banged up this past week, and has literally more mileage than any running back in the entire NFL on his legs from the amount of carries that he has. On a bad team, I don't know. I do feel like those are the kind of guys, and I don't know that there's a process to land on them other than drafting backup running backs. But I think there's, it's something to discuss over the course of the offseason, that like old running back on a potentially bad team, they are shutdown candidates late in the season, and that can get you. Tyjae doesn't really do anything all season, and then all of a sudden you get to weeks 15, 16, 17, ideally 17, and he's a workhorse in a good matchup. And so just something that I've been thinking about, obviously, because I'm hoping for any kind of good run out here for any of my guys, and Tyjae's one I'm hopeful for.
Yeah, Michael brings up a good point about like, I'd want it. We never think of this all the time, but like bonuses for players and stuff, why they would still play. I can't imagine Derrick Henry's like super bonus heavy. I would assume Hopkins is like the guy that you would be like not shutting down because of bonus stuff with his signing, but that's all just guesswork for me. I would say we should have seen this coming from the beginning of the season. The Titans are exactly what we thought they were going to be. They built their team to be exactly what this is, a goddamn mess, right? We were like, they're trying to middle it. They're trying to rebuild, but they're not trying to rebuild. It's just the friction just is never going to work with that type of build on a NFL team. Never mind like a best ball team. They were trying to thread the needle of an NFL team.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just not going to do that. Like, it's 1 in a million on that. So you need Brock Purdy, which Brock Purdy is a whole nother thing where we've learned that we live in a simulation, and the NFL. They had the Tom Brady story, right? They were like, pick 199. He's the best quarterback of all time, which is true. And then they're like, how do we one up it? Well, it becomes WWE, where what's the best spot? What's the best spot for the Royal Rumble winner to be? Number one. What's the best spot for one of the best players of all time to be by the end of their career? Last pick of the draft. What a story. So
he's Shawn Michaels. He's Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is the heartbreak kid.
That's my conspiracy theory.
Shout out to I like it. Shout out to you, Off the Schneid. Agree. Go ahead and hit that like button. I mean, saving the guy's life. Nolan says, what's the incentive to shut him down? Like, the guy can barely walk. He's old. He supposedly has a plate in his foot. Like, he's had a million carries. Like, and what about to get your young guys the football? Like, lots of guys are going to be free agents and they get shut down. It happens all the time. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying guys are going to get shut down later this year. It may not be Derrick Henry. It may be other people that I'm not bringing up. But what I'm saying is it could be Devonte Adams. The point is, remove the name. We know guys are going to not be playing at the end of the season because of XYZ. Obviously injury, right, being one of them. But every single season in week 17, there are guys playing, whether it's full team backups like we see sometimes, or certain guys just being shut down. Like if the Bengals were to have lost these last couple of weeks instead of won 2 in a row, would you see Joe Mixon out there in week 17 in a meaningless game when they got Chase?
Don't want to play him.
When Chase Brown's already been there, they're already like, oh God, we got to get this Chase Brown kid the ball some more.
Mixon's fighting for his life out there.
And you see Mixon, he's playing better. And he's I'll give Joe Mixon credit for this season. He's been better than I thought he was going to be. Like even when he was just like meh for the first 2 months, he showed more juice, I think, this season than he did last season. But like this past week, did you see he took a pretty gnarly hit on the sideline and was holding his shoulder and real slow to get up, and he comes to the sideline and they're checking him out. I think old Mixon would have just like, Samaje, go out there, because he wasn't worried about Samaje stealing his job, right? But he's watching Chase Brown catch a 60-yard touchdown every week, and he's like, you got to let me back in here, dude. I don't care if I got a stinger or whatever. But long story short, those guys, that archetype of a player is a very possible shutdown candidate. Can we predict it necessarily? No, but we can set ourselves up. There was a Robert Griffin the Turd, shout out. That's a great name. Says that's why I drafted Keontae Ingram. How's that working out? Yeah, not good. Obviously, everything always is dependent upon hitting on the right players. You know what the best strategy is? Draft the best players. Like that's always the right strategy. But the point is, we don't necessarily know which one of these backup running backs is going to be. It could be Tajay, could have been Keontae. Obviously, Kiron's doing it already. Josh Jacobs just got hurt. Could end up being Zamir White. Could be who the hell knows, right? It could be anybody. But set yourself up to be lucky. That's kind of the whole, all this, I win with structure and all that draft strategy stuff. The whole point of every one of those conversations is trying to set yourself up to be lucky. And that's all we're really trying to do. And so that's why I wanted to bring up the shutdown thing is if we know inherently that's going to happen, how do I capitalize on that and hopefully get lucky? Because that's really what I'm trying to do, especially right now. Please, one of these teams, I just need to run, I need to sun run here.
Speaking of get lucky, if this is true, B. Sandark is saying that he's trying to get to 70 teams advancing tonight, and he's the one that's in the top 12 of the regular season.
How many?
You're not allowed in the chat anymore. Get out of here. If this is 70 out of 150 in BBM, you're trying to get to advancing, you're going to get auto fucking banned from this channel because that is absolutely unbelievable, and you make me feel really terrible about myself. And I don't need that stuff, right? This is he's having his.
You're going to win. Yeah, you're going to win because you hit on everything. This is basically what Felix did. Advanced 50% of his teams or more or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you have so many bites at the apple. But the funny thing about this is I would love to see BKS's you don't need to type it all in the chat or whatever. But see, the kind of the draft strategy and player exposures in particular, because people talk about, I just want to get as many teams through as possible as their advance rate bros and not playoff upside bros. And I get that. I don't have an issue with that. We don't need to dive into it. But you know how you advance like an absurd amount of teams? It's actually to take big stands and hit on them. That's how you, right? If you did what Felix did a few years ago and you just draft a shitload of Cooper Kupp and Mark Andrews, and they're the 2 league winners, guess what? You advance a lot of teams. And that's how you get the most bites at the apple. How do you mitigate risk and like advance maybe above expectation? That's, spreading out exposures. But that's always an interesting conversation where people are like, oh, dude, what a sick advance rate. What was your strategies? Like, I drafted a fuckload of Cooper Kupp. I drafted a shitload of Cooper Kupp. Like, so awesome. Shout out to me for picking Cooper Kupp. It wasn't, spreading out exposures. And so always a delicate balance, up to everybody how they handle it. But I always love seeing those folks.
That was a ballsy year to do that too. That was because that was the Cooper Kupp. Robert Woods was in that conversation. I know it's hilarious now, but
yep,
it was Evans, it was Chris Godwin, and there was one more wide receiver right in there, DJ Moore maybe, and it was like 5 wide receivers right in that range. So like to take that stand on Cooper Kupp, ballsy, and clearly paid off.
It was awesome. I love this question from Erik Rob, WWE related. So we're bouncing around from best ball to wrestling here, but hey, we're here to have some fun in the remaining few minutes before the game starts. Is this the most amount of superstars that could storyline win the Royal Rumble this year?
This coming year, the 2024 Royal Rumble. Theoretically, it could be CM Punk, but you got to take him out right away because he's just going to be in some sort of other thing. Cody Rhodes is number 1. Of course, Jey Uso is a dark horse because you could set up some sort of Roman Reigns thing with him. LA Knight, of course, is the other guy that I would say 3, but I think it has to be LA Knight or Cody Rhodes this year. So I'll go with 2. I'll say 2 realistically that could win it.
Now using this to ask the same question, but if we're comparing WWE to best ball, if these best ball playoffs, right, are basically it's kind of what it is. That is the Royal Rumble. There's players that are gonna, Mike Evans, Tom Brady, whatever, was not the likely Royal Rumble winner, right? Not the likely best ball tournament winner last season, but that's what happened.
But Mike Evans was Santino Marella, right? Like you had to get Santino Marella through.
Mike Evans was Doink the Clown.
Bushwhacker Luke.
Yeah, exactly. Like absolutely no one saw it coming, nor did they want it. This was like something bad happened backstage between one of the actual superstars and Vince. And Vince was like, you were supposed to win this, but fuck you. I'm giving this, to Doink the Clown or whatever. Like we're moving on. Anyway, I do think this is like a mildly interesting question where, the chalk guys, Tyreek, right, CD, Dak, whatever, are easy. So H-An, Kiron. But like, who else would be one of those guys, right? Amongst the people that enter the Royal Rumble that maybe is a little bit off the beaten path, but you're like, oh man, I could really see this person winning it all for some roster.
Well, I mean, it's funny. We talked about Mike Evans, right? But with all the quarterback, that have gotten thrown over the top rope already and are completely out of this thing, could it be a Baker Mayfield stack that gets you through there? He's been relatively decent. We saw Godwin actually do something this past week. So if you are, we were just making fun of the Evans thing, but if you got some sort of Baker Mayfield double through to the finals, why would that not be viable to win it? He wasn't getting drafted in a lot of drafts. So if you're one of the few that have him, you could probably get him through, sneak him through with whoever. Hell, maybe Sam Howell. Maybe you went Sam Howell and Baker Mayfield and another.
It's an interesting pairing because Howell gets his only good playoff matchup this coming week. And I say good, the Rams are like neutral to positive matchup. But Baker, so you could maybe use Howell score this week, right? Whereas Baker goes to Lambeau. Just not like awful. The Packers defense is not like something I'm scared of, but generally speaking, I don't know that I want to be hoping for a ceiling outcome from Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. And Mike Evans, for all as awesome as he is, future Hall of Fame wide receiver, not the guy I imagine out there in Lambeau, just like really toughing it out and balling out in December. But then they get Jacksonville. I don't know if anybody's watched the Jags defense for the last 2 months, but that was a team that was off to a hot start on defense, and they suck on defense. They're bad. So any matchups you get for the Jags, I think, are a positive one. So that looks good. That looks good for Evans, Godwin, Baker. But Rashad White is another name I'll toss in there, that the Bucks are a team that we've been like, oh yeah, they surprised, they turned out to be really good picks, but mainly Evans and Rashad White. If I got those guys on playoff teams, I would be super excited. I mean, Rashad White's probably one of the best running back picks that we have out there in all of best ball, but I think he just slides under the radar because he's never scoring 35. So I guess, can he really be a league winner? I don't know. But
we also were told he's bad too. So,
well, yeah, him and Kiron are like super duper similar, actually. Like not that athletic, but they can catch the ball and they can pass protect and they get the ball at the goal line. So who gives a shit? Like who cares about the rest of the stuff? But then they also the Bucks get New Orleans in the championship, and the Saints are an absolute disaster. That game also might be for the division. That's an interesting one. I'm going to toss out a small. So talking about the Rams, because I wanted to bring up the Rams just quickly. We'll talk more about them and like Kiron and just how powerful I think that a Kiron team is. But it's not just Kiron. If you look at the playoff schedule here, so these are the weeks 15, 16, 17. You can't get much better than this. The only negative is that this game's outside in New York in week 17. But like the Giants defense stinks, and you get the worst defense in the league in Washington next week. Then you get New Orleans in LA, and then you go to the Giants in week 17. It doesn't really get better for a playoff schedule than the Rams. Stafford is healthy. Kupp is looking healthy. Puka's healthy. Obviously, Kyron's healthy. It's so consolidated. We are super duper, pumped for Kiron teams, and Puka teams look good. It's kind of making Cooper Kupp like just a total afterthought. Nobody's ever mentioning Cooper Kupp, and I understand why. But if you saw, he popped back up last week against the Ravens, and if you told me I was going to get low-owned Cooper Kupp through with this playoff schedule, I'd be like, dude, I'll take my chances on him against Tyreek and CD and whatever, because Tyreek does have a little bit of a tougher schedule, and if you can just outscore him a couple weeks with Cooper Kupp, I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I wish I had more Kiron than I do. I mean, I have a decent amount, and I was even looking at my Kiron big board stuff because we talked about that. I was drafting him a little bit in the big board. I drafted 12 Kiron teams. I got a 33% advance rate on those right now. One of them's close to, it's like 16 points up at the moment. So I would have to look and see if I can get actually chased down or not. But Kiron teams are good. The Puka teams are going to be fun. Hell, I think the Cooper Kupp teams are, I think like any of these Rams that you have is going to be fun because Cooper's advance rate is going to be near
terrible.
Yeah, it has to be bad overall, like in comparison to some of the other first rounders offhand. Like I have a 15% Cooper Kupp advance rate through 13 lineups at the moment, which I'm assuming is above average a bit.
Yeah, that's good.
So I would just say, like, if you can get some of these Rams through, and I know that none of my Rams are Stafford stacks for the most part. I just wasn't drafting Stafford this year. So I don't know. I think that your point is good on the Rams. The Bucks is the other one. I wish I drafted more Rashad White. I haven't said that yet on the show this year. Rashad White was a giant miss for me. I only have 8 shares of Rashad White and BBM. And we want to talk about misses. Rashad White was definitely a massive miss for me in general. And I think that was in part due to Ravens wide receiver stuff, where if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Rashad White was going relatively close to the Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman draft slots.
Yep.
So I think that when you're overweight so much on Rashad Bateman, like I was, and obviously that's a miss, and I was way overweight on Zay Flowers, the guy that it took away from that I could have gotten, 4 more Rashad White teams, just to level it out a little bit more. So cognizant of that going forward as well.
I agree. I am just going to pull this up because BKS wants us to roster bait over his 12th place BBM team, but it is an absolutely awesome team. See the leaderboard here. The big things that stuck out to me when I looked through this team is how you can still finish 12th drafting Darren Waller. Darren Waller on this team, like DK Metcalf has had a couple of good games, but nothing super special. This is, I don't want to say like one of the more shocking teams I've seen at the top, because I wouldn't go that far. My dog is whining over here. I wouldn't go so far as to say like completely shocking, but like if you said this guy's going to finish top 10 in the regular season of all Best Ball Mania, and you started to list off the names you think that they would have, Tyreek is of course one that would be on there. Raheem Mostert is of course one that would be on there, and I'm not sure DJ Moore would probably be somewhat high up on the list, but I there's not that many on here that you would get to. You know what I mean? It's kind of fascinating. Like the tight ends are Kincaid and Kmet are fine. Kmet's had a couple like real big spike weeks. They're fine. Fields and Love are fine, right? Like not amazing, but fine. Kamara's been pretty good. James Cook been okay, particularly lately. But like there's no Achane on here, right? Pittman and Nico been good, but there's no Tank Dell. There's no Kiron Williams. There's no Puka Nacua. Like there's not a lot. And so and even like I would say, you need health, but even then, like the health hasn't been perfect. Fields got hurt, Darren Waller got hurt, right? Some of these guys have gotten hurt, and yet still up there really, really high. So just shout out to the, I believe, I'm trying to go look. He said he had like 90% Dolphins, which was driving this, I think.
Yeah. So on this team that he has for tonight, right? He's got 2,005 points. How far out of first place is he, roughly, or actually? Because you can probably just scroll up, right? So he needs. Oh, he's not getting there.
Yeah, no half stepping's got this baby locked up.
Yeah, I mean, because he has a lot of players live tonight, but just the replacement to replace some of the players that he already has in 12th place there is going to be difficult. So, I mean, I hope that he crushes. I want him to get as high up as he can get.
We are rooting for you, and I think because outside of first place, look, no Tyreek. Trying to see here, there's mostly Tyreek teams, but not everybody has Mostert, right? Not everybody has Tyreek. We can make a run up here, and it's real close. Like what did he have? 2005, 2005, and then you get. Oh man, like shoot, we can make a run up real high here. I don't know.
Yeah,
second,
third probably.
But third is probably within reach. So man, you're gonna have that's a fun sweat. I'll be rooting for you. I also like need Tyreek in the worst way. So we were already on the same side. I'll be rooting for you. I am, however, fading Jordan Love in DFS, so we'll like only be half rooting for each other.
And I'm playing, which is funny because didn't you fade Ritter yesterday?
I did, yeah.
I played Ritter on a $200 single entry, and
I mean the Falcons. I played Bijan, but the Falcons were the best plays like on the board, and the problem is everyone knew that Drake London was the best play, and everyone knew that Kyle Pitts was actually a good play for once, and everyone knew that not that Ritter was like super chalk. That's quarterbacks. I wasn't worried about him, but I'm like, well, when people are playing Ritter, they're playing London or whatever, and so I played Fields. DJ Moore is fine, and Bijan.
I did Ritter with Bijan and Drake London. And if you want to talk about vomiting, when Ritter missed Bijan on that touchdown pass.
Oh my God.
Like how? How did you miss that touchdown pass?
Absolutely unbelievable. Another good segue is one kind of last guy to that conversation about who could win the Royal Rumble. Another first rounder that I think is very much in contention to win that, and it is Bijan Robinson. I think he is not as good as Christian McCaffrey, and he's not as good as those other wide receivers, but his role is really growing a ton. His floor is super duper high. I actually have a good amount of Bijan teams advancing. a little more so on DraftKings, but generally speaking, I have a lot more of my Bijan teams advancing than I thought would have been, given just how good like Tyreek and those other guys have been. But he has a great schedule here down the stretch. Like I said, he's really kind of taking command of that backfield. They have to win. They are in a 3-way tie for the division, so we're not going to see any less of Bijan here down the stretch. I think he makes for a really fun guy to have on teams as well, even though, like, yeah, sure, would you prefer Tyreek? Would you prefer CD, or CMC? Probably, but you're going to get Bijan much lower owned, and he definitely has the chance to, score 25 plus in all these 3 games.
Let's hope that you are completely wrong, because I drafted 5 Bijan Robinson teams in Best Ball Mania, and a total of 0 of those are advancing at the moment, and none of them are close to advancing. So let's hope that the Falcon that you need is Drake London, because I drafted 40 teams with Drake London.
Yep. I'm on board. Drake London is one of my highest owned players across all sites. I have an absolute shit ton of Drake London, so I am fully on board with that. Also, am embarrassed of the amount of Desmond Ridder I have. So, anything for just the Falcons. It's kind of crazy. The ebbs and flows of the Falcons season, it has been an absolute roller coaster. But like today, you're feeling a lot better about every Falcons player right after the big game. And they do have a good schedule moving forward. So I think they can be a pretty big linchpin. This is some sicko stuff, a perfect kind of way to wrap this up. Devin, you are a sicko, and you should come join us tomorrow, because I got tons of different thoughts and ideas on my personal teams as well. I didn't write down everything. I don't think I've written anything down. Like, my wife was writing something down the other day for Christmas stuff, and I was just like, why don't you put it in a note or put it in a spreadsheet or something? She's like, I just like to write it down. And I was like, I don't even know if I could write right now. I think I've lost that. I think I lost that that ability. Like, I think there is like a pen somewhere, and like what is this thing? But I am excited. Not going to write them down, but I'm looking forward to talking through like some of these teams and where they all stand, and do they actually have a chance, and all that fun stuff tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be fun to see how many teams you have advanced. What's going to be really, really fun is whenever we get our pods, right? And I know everyone's going to stress out about it, but try to stay relaxed. They're trying to pod off like thousands and thousands of teams here. And it's probably, if I remember correctly, it was Thursday last year that we had our pods, maybe Friday. So just don't expect them on Wednesday. Correct. Is what I'm saying.
Correct.
And that's no dig at Underdog or DraftKings or whoever. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time for them to get through those. So it's like Christmas. That's what we're waiting for. We're not waiting for Christmas Day. We're waiting for Pod Day, right?
100%.
And 100%. Go through and sort through our pods and see how many teams are alive and how many teams are dead.
To B. Sandark has 50%. Raheem Mostert, shout out to him again, and good luck tonight. And Jay Ching, bring it on tomorrow. We've made it through an hour, but we will have more shows than just tomorrow this week. Of course, there's a link to the Discord. You want to post some of your favorite teams, least favorite teams, funny teams, whatever, bring them to the Discord. I got plenty of them. And yes, I know. And this is great. We'll get into, I promise you, but between, if you're in the Discord, the shows that we got scheduled for this week, including tomorrow, including some other ones that we'll announce hopefully tomorrow, like the conversations on bring any team you want reviewed, bring it to the Discord. You got pods, as Updog says. Look at this dog; he's ready to he's ready to go. Bring him to the Discord. Bring him to the show tomorrow. We'll get you guys all squared away. But this guy is legit ready to get the hell out of here and go watch some football and go watch Tyreek Hill. Have a big game. Enjoy the games tonight. Good luck with the sweats. B. Sandark, good luck. We'll all be rooting for you, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take. Boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.